Colors of Politics, NRI, on RI Free Radio. Just as the rainbow has many colors, there are multiple opinions and views of the way our state government should be run. Let us be to the point and deliver the truth. It is time to break down the colors of politics.
Hello, thank you for listening in tonight on Colors of Politics on RI Free Radio. And this is your host, Amy, and you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter at symbol Colors of RI. Tonight we're going to be discussing a federal bill that has recently just passed both the House and the Senate, and we have two terrific guests this evening, Christy and Christine, and they will discuss their respective experience with the knowledge of the bill and also tell you the names of their organizations so they can give you an idea of what to pay attention to, why to pay attention to it, and of course always to never 100% trust the government. Thank you both for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having us.
And so, Christy, if you want to start with saying your name, the name of your organization, and the first and most important point that you want to highlight.
Okay, my name is Christy Burchett, and I'm with Educate Advocate. We're primarily a California-based organization, and how we got our start was serving families of children with special needs. So that's really, in this particular bill, in the 21st Century Cures Act, that's particularly what we wanted to appeal to, was other organizations, disability types of organizations, special needs organizations, things that would appeal to them of why this bill was a bad idea. So we took about 8 items out of the bill and highlighted them in what we sent out, and we did a letter, like a template letter, and we tried to get other organizations to, submit to their senators to vote no on this bill. And several did come forward. We followed
and just so the listeners can know, the bill that we are discussing is the H.R. 34. Do we know the Senate number for that or no? I just know the H.R. 34.
It stays with H.R. 34. It's because it started in the House, so it is H.R. 34 in both places.
Okay.
Right. So several did, and they wrote in opposing, the bill with their senator as an organization, and then encouraged organization members to also write in. Some of the big things that would appeal to disability organizations has to do with a provision in there involving a service called in-home supportive services. And because actually unions are involved in-home supportive services, that's just how it goes, that also would appeal to them also, because this provision was very big brother type of thing where you have to check in electronically, basically when you're providing service to somebody with a disability, namely your children who have disabilities, that you have to check in electronically, essentially for everything you do. What you're doing, providing the service, that the time you start the service, the time you end it, just very controlled.
That doesn't even sound realistic.
Yeah, so pretty bad. So that was something that would appeal to disability organizations and also unions, that particular piece. The other big one was having to do with electric shock therapy. This is something that a lot of people don't necessarily know still happens, but in Massachusetts it actually still happens at the Judge Rottenberg Center, and they consider it a cure for maladaptive behaviors, usually people who have autism and the like. So we tried to appeal to as many autism organizations. Unfortunately, we found out that Autism Speaks actually supported the bill. And so I guess not really a surprise there because they haven't been very supportive to families. But we tried to reach out to several other large national autism organization groups and also local groups to get them on board. A couple of them did speak out about that. And on our Facebook page and emails that we sent out, we cited articles of how this is connected to the electric shock therapy being a concern in this particular bill, because it can be looked at as a cure to both maladaptive behaviors which exist in autism and also like epilepsy, things like that. So those are kind of some of the big things. Christina, do you want to pick it up? And I know you have more.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Christina Hildebrand. Our organization is A Voice for Choice, and A Voice for Choice Advocacy is our sort of lobbying and advocacy side of things. And our organization specifically educates and advocates on informed choice and transparency into whatever goes into your body. And so obviously this bill is of concern to us. I think the one thing that surprised me or shocked me, shouldn't really, but it's called the 21st Century Cures Act, and on the surface of it, it seems like a great bill that will, is setting aside money for all these different efforts to find cures to diseases that are far and few between and that, haven't had funding. But when you dig deeper, and it is about 1,000 pages long, so my guess is most of the senators and most of the legislators didn't actually read the whole thing. When you read detailed into it, there are some things, two of which Christy mentioned, that there are probably about 8 to 10 different things that are really, really concerning. And in our minds, those negative things should have overridden anyone voting yes on this bill, regardless of how much good it's doing. So one of the key things on our end is the informed consent and really the lack thereof. What the 21st Century Cures Act does is that it basically no longer requires informed consent of subjects for medical devices or drugs. And what that means is that the doctor can, without the patient's knowledge, enroll somebody in a clinical trial for drugs or devices as long as there is what they call minimal risk to the patient and the practitioner and that there are long-term there are safeguards. So basically, if you unravel that, what that means is that somebody can go to a doctor and have, a disease or some disorder or something, and the doctor can put them on a clinical trial. It basically takes away the Nuremberg Code. It's what came out of the Second World War to ensure that everyone had informed consent to any medical treatment. Well, that's now, under this act, will be taken away. We no longer, as long as the doctor decides there's minimal risk, and there's no definition for minimal risk, you can be put on a clinical trial without your knowledge. You obviously, will know that you're on a drug, but you don't know that that drug is in clinical trials. And when something is in clinical trials, that means it hasn't been fully safety tested. So that's probably our biggest issue with the bill. There are a few other things that are also issues. One of them is that the Health Information Privacy Act, or the HIPAA Act, which we all sign when we go to a doctor's office, that basically says the doctor will not share any information with anyone unless they have your specific agreement to do so. That gets taken away and is no longer in place for government agencies. And so basically what that means is the government can access your healthcare information without notifying you, and they have access to it all, which, is knowing our government and knowing how they can use and abuse that, it is scary that we no longer have that privacy for any government agency. So any agency, be it police, be it, be it your legislature, be it your, CDC, you take any government agency and they basically can take that. They don't need to apply those HIPAA laws. So those are probably the two most concerning ones. We do a lot of work on vaccine consent, informed consent, and the parent's right to choose and a person's right to choose what goes into their body. And there are some pieces, some sections in that address vaccines and fast-tracking them, and basically it now allows the approval of drugs, not only vaccines, but drugs by the FDA with the least burdensome means. So It basically means that they can fast-track it as easily as possible, whereas with drugs you would hope that it would be as rigorous as possible, the testing. So those are three, just out of all of them, those are our three that we feel concerned with, but there are others, as Christy mentioned.
Yeah, and those points that you just mentioned in general also instantly brings to mind for me is repeated history. The whole reason why the Nuremberg Code, as I completely tongue twist that word, went into effect was the fact that we had people being used and abused and by the thousands, and a horrible act, and the code went into effect. And here we are repeating history because Hitler was able to do what he did by first taking small, incremented legal steps, which brought him to actually have the power to do what he did. And that's basically what we're doing in a different process, but in essence, our government is taking incremental steps and now just took a big, huge leap to having a lot of medical tyranny control.
Yep.
And so it's really unfortunate. I do have to say the good news I've seen as far as social media in the last 24 hours is I have seen a lot of people that I don't normally see discussing medical legislation actually mentioning it or asking questions. What is this? How do I read the bill? So this bill is like 900 and some odd pages, and it originally started as the HR 6 bill, which passed in the summer of 2015 and became revisioned into the current bill. Now, I don't know which one of you would prefer, but do you want to talk a little bit more about, or if you do or don't know the further details in regards to there is a portion of the act for the clinical trials and the drugs. You already touched upon it, Christina, a little bit as far as what you just said, but there's also more a little bit more, like, as long as there's no more than 8,000 people being studied, then that's kind of the cutoff of where they don't need the informed consent. Do either one of you know a little bit more about that particular section of the bill? Or it's okay if you don't, but I just figured I'd throw it out there.
In my notes, it says Section 2263, clinical testing of medical devices or drugs no longer requires the informed consent of the subjects if the testing poses no more than minimal risk and includes safeguards. I don't know if that's still in there. I know that was in HR 6.
Yeah, that's definitely in there. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't read anything on the 8,000. Yeah, I didn't read anything about there being an 8,000 minimum number, and maybe it is. I will admit that I have scanned through the important sections, but I haven't read the 1,000 pages. I guess that's where I'll sort of jump to that piece of it to just help people understand how this bill came about so quickly. So as you mentioned, the bill was initially in 2015 brought forward before Congress. It was voted by Congress, and was actually more. There were more no votes on it than there were this time, and it stalled and didn't get through the Senate, and it didn't even get voted on in the Senate, and it sat there for basically a year and a half, 2 years, and came up last week, so 1 week ago today. It was brought before Monday, sorry, about 10 days ago, last Monday, it was brought before the Congress. It was HR 34 was a tsunami warning bill that they completely gutted, and they put this new HR 34, they put the wording in there from HR 6, adapted in many ways, but that was where the basis of it was. Called it the 21st Century Cures Act, And what we have to realize is that it was a surprise for us that the legislators had been working on it for the past 2 years. And over 1,400 lobbyists had been working on it for the past 2 years, and over 525 million, over that much money was poured into this bill. And so it went from being something that could have been probably a Cures Act, but it went to becoming something that was absolutely a pharmaceutical industry act. With that many lobbyists involved, with that much money involved, it's not surprising that there were so many yes votes on it. The other thing that's interesting is that each senator and each congressperson had their piece in that bill. So if you listen to the discussion, each person that spoke had their little sort of favorite point in it, be it degenerative disease, be it Alzheimer's, be it cancer, be it opioid addiction, whatever it was. Each person had some investment in it, and so even if they didn't agree with the rest of the bill, they had their little section that they latched onto. And so it passed, it threw us for a loop because it wasn't expected to be brought forward, but in the lame duck session they basically gutted a bill and put this bill in its place that had been so well orchestrated.
Yeah, that is intense amounts of money and lobbyists. And for anybody that's just now tuning in, we are discussing the 21st Century Cures Act, Bill H.R. 34, that just passed both the House and the Senate within the last week and a half. It has gone through both. And we're discussing the points within the bill as to why this is not beneficial, and it definitely has some serious negatives that the public needs to be aware of. And right now the bill is basically just awaiting a presidential signature, as it has passed both houses, with the Senate only having 5 or 6 people vote a no, and 1 or 2 of them not present, I think, and everyone else voting yes.
One abstained and 5 voted no, and then 94 voted yes on the bill.
Yeah, so this is quite an intense bill. And I'm looking over this email actually that you sent out, Christy, and one other part that pops out to me is the removal of the requirement that manufacturers of medical products report payment to physicians for certain educational activities.
Right.
And to me that's big, because that's something that I know I and multiple other parents, it's obviously not something that tens of thousands of people do regularly, but you can look up these reports, as currently it is something that is supposed to be reported, and you can tell if your doctor is getting money or favors or seminars, etc., paid for by pharmaceuticals.
Getting to go to a Hawaiian vacation and get to, hear a seminar for part of the little time that you're there, something like that. Yeah, so
right.
Definitely remove that requirement for them to report those payments.
And the scary thing there is the fact that, now that it also includes not having informed consent for clinical trials, what you have to guess is going to happen is that the pharmaceutical companies are going to come in and lobby the doctors, basically. They don't have to, this one piece of it, they don't have to report it. It just becomes a much more corrupt way of doing things, because there's just not the oversight and not the line drawn to make this ethical and moral. And it's really scary what could happen here, because I could foresee drug companies going into doctors' offices and saying, we've got this latest drug, clinical trial, put all your patients on it, we'll give you, money money to go to Hawaii and have a wonderful trip and all the rest of it, and you know, they're basically being paid off, and that's not in the best interest of a patient.
Definitely not, and it removes multiple provisions, not just that one, but multiple things within this bill are removing the whole purpose and for intensive purposes of checks and balances. Like, we already have issues with checks and balances within the medical field and the oversight from the larger controlling organizations, for lack of a better way to refer to them. And now we just basically took away the majority of any checks and balances that were in place.
Right. And the other piece of it, you know, this whole fast-tracking through the FDA, so the way that they wrote the bill, or the way that, you know, the proponents of the bill talked about the bill, was that they were, that it was going to help these people with these diseases, deadly diseases, or disorders, or, you know, autoimmune compromised people, that they could get access to these drugs much more quickly once they're in clinical trials, and also once they're once they've been approved by the FDA, they'll go through a much faster fast-tracking of approval process. And, you know, that's just, it's something that just the pharmaceutical companies already try and get their products onto the market much faster, and we've seen, you know, enough drugs go on the market and be pulled off the market because of their harmful side effects that were not either not disclosed, or they were not, you know, fully tested. And just knowing that, and one other piece of it that came to our attention is that there's increased funding for the FDA and the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, in the bill for certain things, but there's an agreement that takes funding out of the FDA, and I believe the NIH as well, in the federal budget. So those two organizations have funding in the federal budget. It doesn't take it all away, but it definitely takes away some of the funding in that budget. Now, the Republicans have said, don't worry, we'll make sure that it's in the budget. Like, we'll make sure that that money is still there. But it's at their complete discretion, and they may do it this year, they may do it next year. But in the future, what happens when the FDA isn't properly funded, and you have, you know, these drugs being fast-tracked through something that can't support it, and they, you know, most likely will just continue, you know, pharmaceutical companies are likely to be the ones paying the bills, is what I could foresee happening. And it's another place where, you know, there's just so many pieces of this bill that are just not, it should have caused a no vote in many, many more legislatures.
Yeah, and frankly, I was surprised about the media. You know, the media, especially alternative media, did a really good job, and even non-alternative media, like LA Times, for instance, here in California, covered that this was a lobby, you know, pharmaceutical lobbyist-driven bill. There's a lot of parallels to our fight with SB 277 in California. I felt with this particular bill, you had a lot of people calling all over the country. I know they got a lot of calls all over the country.
Oh, yes. There was a couple thousand people.
Yeah. And we were all, and they would tell me, the staff would say, they're all calling to vote no. So, and just like California, we were all saying no, the majority, and they didn't listen to us. And the U.S., you know, government didn't listen to us either. But I think what we really need to learn from this, which I'm just learning, you know, as I go along too, is we need to do a better job of appealing to people outside of our choir, so to speak, that are non-health freedom vaccine groups. Find things that appeal to their self-interest, so that they can come on board. Like Standing Rock. Once you have the veterans come, I think, you know, things shifted there. I'm not saying that the problem is solved, but things have shifted there as far as, you know, other groups coming out and supporting things, not just the same people. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and speaking of, actually, you just said like the veterans going to Standing Rock, it's actually known, and many veterans admit, that they are kind of the government's guinea pigs on a regular basis. They consistently get told to take this or take that, and they're not, the majority of it, they're not supposed to be challenging or rejecting taking it. And then even after the fact, once they are no longer serving and they're dealing with the VA hospitals, there's story after story after story of them just not getting the treatment that they're actually needing, or these extremely long wait lines, and they're still going through not being the priority as far as the medical side of things go. So with this bill and the whole let them test you without your consent as long as we consider it minimal risk and including safeguards, I don't know if you can get any more vague than that. That says so little of anything. And then you have your VA hospitals and all the veterans and everything that they will most likely be affected by, and I hate to say it, but possibly even targeted first, just because it's already known that they already have had to go through a lot of things, and they are not really respected as far as medical things go.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, there definitely, everybody needs to know that this bill pretty much affects every single person. There might be 1 or 2% of the population that would feel that it doesn't affect them, but some way in shape or form. I'm actually seeing a 2-sentence thing from your email, Chrissy. The likelihood of prescription drug prices increasing and becoming less accessible to lower income patients with Section 4002. Generic drugs authorized by the brand name drug manufacturer are excluded from the calculation of average manufacturer price when determining rebates under Medicaid. I'd say that affects like an enormous portion of the population.
And that, to your point, the veterans and the Medicaid, and here in California it's Medi-Cal, but and the Medicare folks are, there were congressmen and senators that spoke out on behalf of those people because they voted no on the bill because they felt that it really discriminated for those specific groups that you just pointed out.
Right.
So it was recognized by very few and seen as an issue by very few of the legislators. But those were 2 points that were brought up in both houses during the discussion for those who were against the bill.
Right.
And I will say, if you read A Voice for Choice's comments on it now, it is likely to be passed by President Obama. There is so much support behind it and so much money behind it that for him to go against it just would make no sense at all. It also sort of solidifies Obamacare a bit more and puts another nail in that coffin before Trump comes in. And if you read our recommendations or our action items, one of them is to look at your health care and look at what does your health care mean to you, and does it need to include that sort of Western allopathic medicine, or can you look at it and look at what other alternatives are there? And there are lots and lots out there that have been around for thousands of years, much longer than allopathic medicine. You look at the Chinese herbal medicine, you look at homeopathy, you look at chiropractic. There's a lot out there, not just naming 3 of them, but there's a lot out there, and I really, we obviously have no vote in our government at this point. We have very little say there, both statewide, especially in California for us, as well as nationally. And so, the other thing that we can do is we can vote with our dollars. Where are we going to spend our money? And I would urge people to look at their pharmaceutical intake and can those work out a difference options to that. You know, I do market research as my real job, and one of the clients that we've done research for, one of the things that came out of it was that the seniors above the 65-year-olds take an average of 13 prescription drugs, which to me is horrific, the fact that we have that large a number of prescription drugs amongst our seniors, and that's the average. So, you know, there are people that are taking 4 and 5, and you know there are people that are taking 20 or more. And I just, you know, I look at it and it's just, and a large part of that comes from the fact that we're one of the 2 countries in the world that allows TV advertising, direct consumer TV advertising for pharmaceuticals. And so our country consumes 75% of the world's pharmaceutical drugs. So we in the U.S. consume 75% of all the drugs that are made in the world, which again is just, I mean, it's you have to question how is the rest of the world alive if they don't do that. Well, they're alive because there are other means, and we don't have to be on pharmaceutical drugs. But to me, it's horrifying, the whole pharmaceutical drug industry. But I would urge people to look at what are you taking, and is it necessary, or is there an alternative to it? Because we can, until we get the money out of the government or the money out of those corporations, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place on these laws.
Right. And I have to say, in Rhode Island, we have a chiropractor practice called Back to Health Chiropractic that is a no insurance chiropractor, and for $20 you can go have a chiropractic visit. It's $20 per visit, per day, no insurance, flat rate.
Wonderful.
So I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody in Rhode Island or even Eastern Connecticut listening. You do have that option without the insurance. So, Christy, would you like to throw out any call to action plan that you want to say? We have about 45 seconds.
Yeah, in regards to this, I think it's really critical and important to call and thank the Senate members and members of Congress who voted no. And if you have an organization that you can tie to that, also mention that. This helps to build relationships, and it makes you feel good, and they probably aren't getting a lot of calls after this it's already done. So, you know, I know because I called today, and they sure appreciated hearing thank you. So, and I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah, terrific, great. So thank you so much for being on this evening, and thank you listeners for listening to another episode of Colors of Politics on rifreeradio.org. And don't forget, you can download the TuneIn app and listen there to 12:30 and 5:30 Eastern Standard Time daily, and find us on Facebook and Twitter at Colors of RI. Thank you, and have a great night.